Welcome to another edition of the Bible Provocateur, and I'm your host, Jonathan Eubanks. Today starts the inaugural session that I call Just Talkin, which will be the first of a series of interviews with individuals from various different backgrounds, speaking about their life experiences and how that has transformed their lives, or how Christ has transformed their lives as a result from some of their experiences and just how they relate to us. So really, it's a segment centered around testimonies, and we'll be looking at a host of other different types of discussions to have, whether they're theological based, social based, politically based, whatever, but everything is designed to be focused on glorifying the Lord Jesus Christ. Today, for my first session called Just Talkin, or the Just Talkin series, I have my cousin here, Mark Hundley, who's had a very unusual history, one such that most people don't have. And the way he's dealt with these things and his life's experiences and where it got him to right now, I personally am very proud of him. But I want to give him a platform to really talk about his experience, and I hope that it will help as many of you out there deal with some of the things you have to deal with, or at least to give you a different perspective on what you might consider trials and tribulations in your own personal life. So with that, I want to introduce Mark Hundley. Hey, Mark.
Hey, good afternoon.
How's everything going?
Pretty nice.
So I want to give people a snapshot of kind of like what your life was like, how you got where you are now, and just sort of have a casual conversation on what your life has been, how you got where you are. And like I said, just a casual conversation so the listeners get to know you and get to know something about your experience. But first of all, you are a Christian for sure. But what I want to do is I want to highlight your life up to that point and let people get to understand exactly what you've gone through. And then we'll start focusing on how God has called you to glorify Him in your life now. So with that being said, it goes without saying that you're a Christian, but let's start with, if you don't mind, how old are you?
I'm 57.
57 years old.
Yes.
And where were you born?
Los Angeles, California.
And you've been there all your life?
Yes.
What about your parents? Are they still with us?
My mother is, but my father's deceased. He passed almost a year ago.
Mm-hmm. How you feel about that?
It was hard dealing with him passing and watching him become ill, which led up to his death. But it was something that I had to deal with.
Were two of you very close?
Very close, very close. He was my father, but he was also like a big brother. My parents had me when they were young. So in the process of me growing, I watched them grow as well.
Right. What about your mom? You and her pretty close as well?
Not as close as my father, but we're close.
Mm-hmm. What about siblings? How many siblings do you have?
I have one sister and one brother.
And I'm assuming that they're still with us now as well.
They're still here. We're pretty close.
So who's the oldest?
I'm the oldest.
The oldest one usually gets privileged. Mark and I are cousins, and both of us are the oldest on our sides of the family. But so we both can have shared experiences on what it means to be the oldest. So Mark, how would you describe your family life growing up overall?
Overall, my family we were very close, very close. I mean, like most families, you had ups and downs and trials and tribulations, but for the most part, very close-knit family.
Yep, I understand that. We grew up with a lot of situations in our lives that we didn't realize probably wouldn't have made us very happy if we understood it. But somehow, in spite of all of that, we had a lot of fun growing up.
I agree.
So outside of like being at home in the house with family, how would you characterize your life outside the house, away from family, but with your friends and things like that growing up? How would you characterize that life?
Early on, it was pretty like the same dynamics of the family, the household, family relationships. Friends were pretty close. Growing up in the era that we grew up in, the community was like a family. Parents could discipline us. Our friends' parents.
Yep.
It was like a extended family. I had a pretty much fun childhood.
Then you had an unusual set of circumstances sort of overtake you, and it was no doubt hard for you, and I'm sure it was hard for many people in the family, including myself. But talk a little bit to the audience about what I'm talking about. What changed in your life that really stands out the most?
Well, like I said, basically when we were younger, elementary school, junior high, it was, basic childhood, events that occurred. But after a while, I started getting involved with gangs and illegal activities that eventually led to me being incarcerated.
Wow. Now, what do you think? What do you think led to that? What made you go in that direction? Because from like I know a lot about how you are as a person,
Right.
and you've always had a good heart. And a lot of people that know you say the same thing, and so in a lot of ways, it was frustrating because we knew you to be so different than a lot of people that you ran the streets with. So, what do you think drew you to that lifestyle?
Well, at the time, I didn't know these things, but as I soul searched throughout the years and during my incarceration, I came to realize that I was insecure. I came from, even though we had a close family, my parents had separated when I was very young. So I dealt with that. And like I said, just basically being insecure and trying to find myself and, succumbing to peer pressure and just basically wanting to fit in, and which led to other things.
I mean, you were incarcerated, and just for the audience's sake, I want to let everyone know that I told you that you could be as totally free and open as you want to, or not say what you want.
Right.
Are you able to talk about what you're incarcerated for?
Of course.
So let us know, first of all, how long you were incarcerated and for what reasons.
I was incarcerated for approximately 28 years for the crime of murder. A murder that I was connected to but didn't participate.
Right.
I didn't murder the person, but I knew the people involved in the actual murder. And because of my background, I was connected and convicted of the crime, even though I wasn't present. However, during my incarceration, like I said, soul searching and, evaluating my life, I came to realize that my lifestyle, my choices put me in that situation. Even though I was innocent of the crime, I wasn't innocent of my lifestyle. I sold drugs. I was a gang member, and did certain things that put me in a position to get caught in the middle of this crime. Had I been going to college or working and living a productive life that most people do, I probably would never have been connected with this.
Right. So, and it's funny because a lot of people, well, it's not really funny, but a lot of people joke about inmates all being innocent. There's a joke that people always say about all of us claiming to be innocent. What do you say to people who have that view and about you in that regard? Because you're saying here that you were innocent of a variety of crimes and things you may have done in your life, but you just weren't guilty of this one in particular.
Right.
So how would you respond to somebody who would make that assessment that all inmates claim to be innocent, or basically really saying that all inmates are actually guilty?
Well, once again, I think a lot of it has to do with being honest with yourself. I understand, because you hear it a lot about people saying they're innocent. But once again, I can only really speak for myself. And that was something that I had to come to realize that, even though I was innocent of the crime, that the things that I did in my life put me in that situation.
Right.
Like I said, had I been living a productive life, the odds of me being caught in the middle of something like that would have been,
What would you say kept you from, using your own words, kept you from leading a productive life?
Well, once again, my insecurities, it wasn't something that happened just overnight. It was a process. A lot of the guys that were in the gang that I was involved with, we grew up, playing sports, reading comic books. It was a gradual process. And the influence of the community led to us eventually becoming gang members, which most cases, that's how it is. You just don't wake up one day and, oh, I'm a gang member. It's a process and it's gradual. But once again, seeking that acceptance and wanting to fit in. And what I also came to realize was my insecurity, stemmed from my complexion. Being a African American or black, whatever term, people choose to take on regarding their race and ethnicity. I'm lighter than the average black. So once again, like I stated earlier, my parents were separated and my mother had moved to the San Fernando Valley. And as you know, my father stayed in Los Angeles. So when I lived in Los Angeles with my father, the people in the community were referred to me as white. Whereas when I would go to the San Fernando Valley, which was predominantly white, I was referred to as the N-word and other, negative terms.
Right.
So it was a struggle trying to fit in because on the one hand, with my own race, I was called white or white boy or things of that nature. But then when I would go around white, I was black or the N-word.
Right.
So it was a struggle with that. And I received more acceptance in Los Angeles. Even though I went through that, with my own people, I was still more accepted as opposed to when I was in the Valley. So it was just something like, like I said, trying to fit in.
But let me ask you this question, because you mentioned fitting in and acceptance. Didn't you fit in and have acceptance with your family?
Well, yes, I did, always.
So what was lacking to you?
Well, I did, but I think moving around a lot, as a kid, like I said, my parents were separated, so I would spend time with one parent for a certain length of time and time with the other. But I don't know, it's kind of hard to say. Just you have your family and you're always accepted with them, but you still want to have friends and outside of the household. So that's basically it in a nutshell. Just want to be accepted with friends.
Right. So for the audience's sake, how old were you when you went to prison?
I was, when we received the case, I was 22, 23.
And then you were finally released when?
November of 2013.
Wow. And at what age were you then?
I think I just turned 50,
So from 22 years old
22.
to 50. So that's 28 years incarcerated. How did you cope inside?
In various ways. For the most part, I always knew that that wasn't the end. Through my belief system in regards to God and Jesus, I always knew that it wasn't going to end there. I never had any clarity in regards to an actual date because my sentence was 34 years to life. So as a lifer, you don't really have a specific date. You have to go to the parole board and other things before you're released. So I never knew 2013. You just knew you had to do the time, and it was up to the parole board and then eventually the governor.
So you got a sentence of 34 to life, is that correct?
Yes.
And you got out in 28 years of that sentence term.
Yes.
So, and I'm assuming you had parole hearings and board reviews or whatever they're called. How many of those did you have?
Actually, 2.
Yeah, in 28 years, all you had 2.
Yes. They have these they're not what you would call full boards. I can't remember the actual term, but just like a review. You go through a review, and they go through the things that you've done, good or bad, and they put it off for so many years. But I had actually 2 full boards. I think one in 2008 and then one in 2012.
So now I'm assuming that you're out now, obviously.
Yes.
So many people might have a variety of assumptions as to how you got out, why you got out, because that seems to be one of the kind of sentences that is pretty serious, since it was that so long, and it seems to me it would be some very unique circumstances that would make them willing to let you go. So shed some light on that. Like how does somebody with a 34 to life sentence and only 2 boards get out? I mean, did you have to admit to guilt?
Well, that's the thing.
Did you have to snitch on somebody?
No.
Like in the movies? I mean, so why? How did that happen?
Well, in my case and in most cases, you have to meet certain requirements. One of the things that the board looks at is 3 factors: remorse, responsibility, and insight. And they do this through basically your actions.
Right.
They have violations. If you commit certain violations, most likely you'll be denied parole, which I hadn't had any violations for over 20 years. I received my college degree, my GED. I facilitated numerous programs that, teach these things that they're looking for, helping other inmates understand why they're there, certain steps that they can take to improve themselves and have a better outlook on life, just things of these nature. And when you go to the board, they have basically your whole life there in your file. So they've been educated in regards to what to look for. And when you're communicating with them, they look for certain things. And when they see these things, they're going to either grant you parole or deny you.
So for what reasons would you say, or were you told, or how that worked out? Were the reasons why they finally agreed to let you go?
Well, once again, the accomplishments that I had, But for the most part, the insight that I had into my crime, like I stated earlier, I maintained my innocence and, through the whole process from day one until the day I was released.
Mm-hmm.
But what was unique from what I was told from them was the insight that I had. I understood that even though I didn't commit this crime and there was plausible evidence showing this to them, but I took responsibility for the choices that put me in the situation that I was in.
Right.
So they saw these things, and it was a puzzle that all the pieces fit together.
Mm-hmm.
So they knew that through my actions while I was incarcerated, working on my education, helping other people, and once again, soul searching and finding the issues within myself that put me there.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, it was a combination of things, but for the most part, the insight and taking responsibility that, I was a gang member, I sold drugs.
Mm-hmm.
These things put me in a situation
Mm-hmm.
to be found guilty of a crime that I didn't commit. So
I would imagine that would be a strong statement, even for any law enforcement official who hears that kind of thing, because I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that not very many people make that kind of a confession that I didn't do this, but I'm guilty of many things that warrant being incarcerated. So, how long into your incarceration did you go before you came to that conclusion?
Well, it was just like anything in life when you're growing.
Mm-hmm.
It was a process. Initially, I was bitter, because I felt like.
But bitter with who?
I was bitter with.
Or toward who?
I was bitter with myself. There were times when I questioned God.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this happening?
Mm-hmm.
But all these things led to me once again soul searching.
Mm-hmm.
And, coming to the realization that I couldn't blame nobody but myself.
Well, I think that is where, one of the many parallels that we can make about our associating ourselves with Christ, and how we associate ourselves with Christ, because what I want our audience to understand out of this whole thing is what you went through with having committed crimes, then being arrested, then being taken through the judicial system, and then being more or less condemned, sentenced, to your period of time that you were required to serve, and then after that part, becoming made aware through however means that came about, that your situation is the result of your own actions or inactions in terms of how you got where you are. But my point is, I think what I want to get the audience to understand is how those parallels, what you went through parallel what we have to go through to become a Christian.
Right.
Because we have to realize, sinners have to realize about ourselves as it pertains to God and Christ, our Savior, who is our sovereign Lord and Judge. So we need to respond to Him the way you responded to the legal system and within that framework. In other words, realize that we have broken the law, that we're lawbreakers.
Right.
We have to know that we're lawbreakers. Then we end up getting to the point where we have to end up being called to account for our sins or our law breaking. And that's what sin is, breaking the law. That's what sin is, breaking the law. The only difference is you broke man's law, civil laws, whatever, and had to pay your price for that, had to pay a price for that. sinners, which are all of us, have broken God's holy law, and we have to give an account for that. The only difference is, unlike your situation, being a lawbreaker before God and remaining one and never coming to a conclusion that all that led you to your incarceration was your own fault results in ramifications that are eternal. And so that's why I think it's good, because it would be very easy to, for people, because I've shared the gospel with people, and I'm sure you've heard people say the same thing. It's like, if a Christian hears about, or even a person who's not a Christian, hears about somebody who lived a life, let's say, like the kind you had, and now you are a saved man, a faithful man to the Lord of God, trust Christ as your Lord and Savior. Other people would say, how can he call himself a Christian with all he's done? You know what I mean? Like, God is going to save those kind of people? How do you answer somebody that would say, how can you be a Christian after all you've done? How would you answer that question?
Well, I think first and foremost, I try not to judge people. And for those that do, based on my belief system, that judgment is up to God.
Right.
So when it comes to stuff like that, it's just one of those things that either you get it or you don't. Mm-hmm. As a Christian, you have to know that God has the final word. Mm-hmm. So for me to condemn somebody or something that I may not even fully understand, or understand the circumstances of how they got to that point and how they got to the point that where they are today, to me, that's wrong. But I mean, I really can't answer that question because it's not up to me or them.
Right.
It's up to God. God has the final word. And, to judge people like that, I believe is wrong.
It is. I mean, but, when people say that, and I've heard it many times, when people say that, they say that from the premise that God only saves, quote unquote, good people. Well, if God only saves good people, what are they being saved from? If they don't feel that they are criminal, meaning lawbreakers against God's law, then what would be the need for them coming to Christ in the first place?
Right.
Now, Jesus made it very clear that they that are whole do not need a physician. In other words, people who see themselves well and nothing wrong with them, why do they need a savior? But the scripture tells us plainly that God came to save people such as us.
Right.
There may be varying degrees of how we sin against God.
Right.
There may be different types of sins that people have as their signature sins, so to speak, that violate God's law. But with God, breaking and committing one sin once in your life is worthy of eternal damnation. Not because of guidelines for fairness in our civil legal system, but because of what's required by God, who's absolutely holy and without sin. So what he says is, because he's eternal, if you break one of his eternal laws, you pay eternally. Unless you do what you did, which was to confess that your violations were yours. Right. And owning up to those things. And in Christian faith is confession of sin, and then it's turning from that, and then turning to God. And we call that conversion, as you know.
Yes.
So this is something that I think the audience should understand, because it's very easy to look at somebody who we think in our own mind has done this and that, and then make an assessment as to whether or not they deserve this or that, when people don't realize they're in the same exact boat. maybe not on the civil level, but certainly when it comes to entrance into God's kingdom. And that's what it's all about.
Yes, sir.
So while you're in, that's a lot of time to pass. You mentioned soul searching a few times, but what do you think were some of the comforts, if I can say that you were provided that made your incarceration bearable?
Well, excuse me. One of the things that a lot of people don't understand is, and some people, especially people that were incarcerated, some people would probably have the issue with me saying this, but when you're incarcerated, all your needs are met. They may not be to the degree that you like, or you probably, like clothing, you're provided clothing. It may not be, Gucci or
Right.
whatever, but you have your basic needs are met, food, clothing, and shelter. Once again, I didn't like it, but I didn't have to pay for certain things. People in there don't have bills that they have to pay. When you come home, you have a lot of things that you forgot existed, more responsibilities. But when you're in there, you're doing time, but time also is somewhat of a luxury. You may find yourself having to work in society. You may want to read a book, but you don't have the time to. But in there, you have the time to read, study. That's why I was able to accomplish a lot of things, because I was able to utilize that time in a positive manner. And that was one of the good things. Other than that, I didn't like it, but once again, I was able to find a balance. My father had told me, and it always stuck with me. It was like, look, you may as well get as much as you can out of this, because you're going to be there. So try to accomplish as much as you can, whether it be mentally or spiritually. And that's what I focused on. It was a lot of things that were uncomfortable. The whole experience was uncomfortable, but I was able to make good out of some of that. So it's an individual thing. You have people that go in there. Like I said, initially I was bitter, but I grew out of that and started focusing on other things. And that's what I did. But some people, they stay bitter. Some don't. It's an individual. It's just like with society. And being incarcerated is a microcosm of society. The same things that exist in society exist in there. Drugs, sadness, happiness, money, whatever. The same things that's in society. It may not be in abundance, but they're there.
Would you think that for the reasons for your incarceration, do you feel that how you served was too lenient or too difficult? I mean, like in other words, some people like to say that prisons are like summer camps. Like they're not really punishing anybody, because there's always this talk about recidivism. People coming out and then going back in because they can't cope on the outside. I mean, my thoughts are, I'm thinking that if I were incarcerated, I would be doing everything I could if I got out to never go back.
Right.
So, do you think that there's a possibility that you could see yourself going back?
No, never. And that's the thing. You and I talked about this before, where the recidivism rate for individuals that had life sentence, if I remember correctly, were like 0.1%. That's less than 1%. And I agree with those numbers, because individuals in that situation, lifers, they tend to be more disciplined. They look at things, and not necessarily just lifers, but individuals who've done, a serious amount of time. usually 10 years or more.
Mm-hmm.
So they look at things differently. Even while they're incarcerated,
Mm-hmm.
they look at things different. A lot of people in there see it.
Mm-hmm.
It might be hard for a person that's never experienced to understand what I'm saying, but they have more of a discipline. And
You mean the lifers do?
yeah, the lifers do.
Right.
So that plays a part. It's just an individual thing as well, because I've seen some lifers that don't, but the majority do.
Right. Right. Is it common for somebody to have been incarcerated so long for the type of crime that you were incarcerated for to get out? I mean, how is that? It just seems like not a very likely thing for somebody that's been.
Well, for a long time it was. I believe Jerry Brown, under Jerry Brown, I think he knew the system better because he was governor before.
Governor of California, right?
Yeah, California. Mm-hmm. And I think he started implementing certain things that allowed lifers to get out based upon their accomplishments. Mm-hmm. Basically being rehabilitated. Mm-hmm. But before that, it was rare for a lifer to get out. Mm-hmm. The numbers were like very, very small. So, mm-hmm.
So you were definitely blessed to be able to get out of there when you did.
Exactly.
How did your release affect your relationships with some of the other incarcerated men who you befriended?
Well, for the most part, where I was at, which was called level 2, you have like level 4 all the way to level 1. Mm-hmm. When I initially came to prison, I was on level 4. Mm-hmm. But based upon my behavior and certain things, they have a point system. My points lowered, and I was able to eventually get to a level 2. And most of the guys there, for the most part, were happy. Mm-hmm. I think some were jealous, which I could kind of understand to a degree. But for the most part, a lot of people I didn't even know, because like I stated before, I facilitated a lot of programs and participated in a lot of programs. So it was like a brotherhood of individuals that were trying to better themselves, trying to utilize the resources, to get out. So, we came in contact with each other, but some I didn't remember. But I had a lot of people, when they found out that I was granted parole, that were like coming up to me and hugging me and congratulating me. Mm-hmm. It was a good feeling. But once again, I think there's a couple that probably were
not happy about it, huh? Or like you said, maybe jealous. Or it's hard to see somebody that you befriended over so many years leave when you're under the same sort of situation, and then somebody leaves before. That's got to be hard. I mean, I had a similar experience in the Navy. It doesn't compare anything like the prison, right. But when you make friends in a certain setting, and you've been there for 4 or 5 years, in my time in the service, you leave those friends behind. It's different. So
that's understandable.
Yeah. So I can understand that. But let me ask you this question. So when you're in, what did you miss the most about the outside?
Well, basically, and it's so simple, just freedom, the opportunity to do what you want when you want.
Right.
That's the hardest part about being incarcerated. You're told basically when to get up, when you can go to the yard, when you can shower, when you can go to the store, when you can eat. Everything is controlled. It's a controlled environment. So, that was it in a nutshell, just the freedom to do as you please.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. So how would you say that your incarceration shaped your development as the man you are now, or the man you are right now? How did that contribute to the kind of person you are?
Well, just like what we were talking about, the lack of the freedom to do certain things, it creates patience. Mm-hmm. We used to have this term, to hurry up and wait. Mm-hmm. So you learn patience and within situations, but also with people. Mm-hmm. And that's what it has helped me the most with, like when I came home, like traffic, especially in California, Los Angeles specifically, is just horrible. But
Right. That's what I was going to ask you next. So when you got out, I mean, I could imagine that the world looked completely different to you. I've been out, so I've been wasn't in that situation, but the transition in terms of how what goes on in the cities and what goes on at home is so gradual. We don't necessarily notice.
right.
You know what I mean? But you left at 22, closed off from the world basically, and then come back out at 50. And how did the world look to you?
Totally different. We were born and raised in Los Angeles, so basically I knew LA like the back of my hand.
Mm-hmm.
It took, I mean, other than knowing the streets,
Right.
that, like maybe Crenshaw and Florence or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
seeing the street signs, but trying to remember how it was, it was really difficult at times. I would see the street and be like, this isn't, even homes
Right.
that I was familiar with, parents' homes, grandparents, family members' homes look totally different, neighborhoods that we grew up in. It took a while for me to adjust, but it was a lot of different stuff. A lot.
So let me ask you this question. What do you think, for a lot of people who may be listening, I would have to imagine that everyone is connected to someone somewhere along the way who is either in prison or has been in prison, or they don't know yet that someone potentially under their roof is on their way to prison and they may not even know it. So my question to you is, you talked about being needing acceptance on the outside, and then you talked about having that with your family and being happy with them. So for those people out there who may be parents or have relatives or close friends or whatever, how do they, what can they do to identify what you were going through and somebody they're related to? How could they, what could your family have done to sort of, if anything, to sort of help curb this direction that you end up going into?
Well, I think first and foremost, communication is extremely important. I think you have to have a bond and a connection with the children or younger family members to where they feel comfortable talking to you. Like growing up, I knew my parents were there, aunts, uncles, everybody, but I never felt comfortable talking to them about certain things, So I think you have to have the children feel comfortable enough to where they can talk. Also, I think it's important that you pay attention to certain signs, like your children's friends, certain behaviors,
Right.
that you see taking place, like you see these kids with their pants, we never were really into tight clothing, but, some of the stuff you see now with kids, pants, their buttocks exposed, and, all these are little telltale signs that you have to pay attention to, drugs, but basically who your kids spend time with and what they're doing when they're spending time. If your kids are into sports and school, they're getting good grades, the odds are real small that they're involved with gangs and, negative stuff that takes place in society. So you just have to pay attention, really. That's the key, paying attention and communication.
What would you tell the young men, young women, whoever? What would you tell them directly in terms of what your experience has been, where it got you to? What advice would you give them if they're headed down this dangerous path?
Well, first and foremost, it's not worth it because if you're involved in crime, gangs, it's just a matter of time before it's going to catch up with you. Everybody that I know that was involved in that lifestyle has either been incarcerated or killed or both. Not nobody I know that was a gang member or living that fast life, drug selling and all that, that hasn't encountered some type of either death or incarceration. So it's just a matter of time. And, with everything that's going on in the world right now, I think children have more opportunities to be successful than they did when we were coming up. You have sports, you have entertainment, you got tech, just so many things going on that you can utilize to be productive and,
Yeah, but one of the things that I observed, even in my own career in making video games in the past, but with the internet, with games and these types of things, you find people, a lot of kids like you, looking for acceptance. Only thing is, when we were growing up, gang members sought it from the street. They sought it from other gang members or whatever. But now, people are trying to make connections and trying to find acceptance online with people that they don't even know. Trying to get likes and click-throughs and being friended. And then, like you hear today, but kids getting mad because somebody unfriended them on Facebook. And I personally think it's ridiculous. The most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Right.
Somebody comes to you and says, such and such just unfriended me on Facebook. It's like, ouch. Like really? But you got these social media platforms that are distracting kids and keeping them away from social interactions.
Right.
So now they're seeking their acceptance from these online personas. So on some level, to me, I see that there's a lot of damage that can be taken there. Now, trying to find acceptance on the internet is probably not going to cause you to end up in jail.
Right.
But how do you think that might impact how this way of trying to find acceptance might impact young kids, especially young men?
Well, once again, I think it boils down to the household first and foremost. What type of values are being instilled? What kind of time is being spent with them, and once again, communicating. Taking the time to let the kids know the pros and cons of the internet or whatever. Because even with sports, you see where you have individuals that are Christians or law-abiding citizens in the sports world, but then you also see some they end up going to prison, having difficulties with drugs, whatever. It's no matter what walk of life, there's the good and the bad. So once again, it starts with the parents and instilling in them values, putting God and Christ first. These things, you have to stay on top of it because once again, there are a bunch of opportunities that didn't exist when we were kids. However, with those more opportunities come more problems.
Right. So
once again, it's hard. Like I said, especially in this era, I don't want to get into politics or whatever, but we've seen a lot of crazy stuff take place. But there's still good there. You just have to find it and stay on top of your kids. Really,
it seems like kids. You have them, I have them, and it seems like whenever you see a kid trying to shroud themselves in anonymity, and secrecy, we don't pay attention to that. And then when they do something off the deep end, we come off surprised when things don't go right for our kids the way we think they should go. But anyway, so now for the real meat of this, I mean, this, your experience is, there are details in that can keep us talking for hours on all that. But what we are trying to do here with the Bible Provocateur is to reveal to the audience how you having this experience and having it, how did you end up coming to know Christ? How did that happen?
Well, especially throughout my incarceration, like I said earlier, I always knew through my connection with God and Christ that he was there. Even though being incarcerated was uncomfortable, but the more I started stepping towards him, I started seeing things that were favorable. And I knew I was chosen by him because of the things that took place. Like I said, being incarcerated for a crime that you didn't commit and being found suitable for parole was very, very rare, especially when you maintain your innocence. So paying attention to the signs that he was giving me, and appreciating them, it just drew me closer and closer because I saw these things taking place. Like I said, it's kind of hard to explain, but he was there all the time. And I honestly believe, and we've talked about this many a times, that this was his way of saving me. Having me go through what I went through to get here, and I honestly believe that to the day I die, that he saved me by allowing me to go where he needed me to go.
Right. That's a good point because going back to the question that I asked you before about how people make the wholesale assessment that all inmates, claim to be innocent or that they're all guilty and that kind of thing. But what you're saying right now really says a lot because when you're incarcerated for a crime, and you have to go serve this time for it or whatever, you have to deal with these consequences internally, and like, because you can't go anywhere whether you like it or not. You can't go anywhere, so you're forced to sort of deal with these things. But the point I was going to be making is that God, like you said, that God used that whole circumstance, 28 years of imprisonment, and throughout that process, to bring you to Christ. So when people question whether or not you can be a Christian or that God should save you, they're not really attacking you as much as they are attacking God's process.
Exactly.
So you said that there were instances where you knew or instances that so to speak stood out in terms of knowing that Christ was involved. What are some of those?
Well, like I kind of briefly touched on earlier, there were times where I was bitter, and during my reflections, my prayers, whatever, I would question, like, God, why are you allowing this? But there would also be situations that would occur that were clear that he was still there, even though I was questioning him and questioning my faith and everything.
Right.
But he stayed there and he continued to light the way. Just it's like I can't like really point out no specific occurrence,
Right.
but these were things that throughout that time that he watched. For example, like there were like violence, that occurred in there, riots. Like I said, initially I was on level 4 yard,
Right.
and it would be things that would happen that he shielded me from, where other individuals I knew got caught in the middle of a riot. I wasn't. Just little things that may seem small, but when I would reflect on it, I'm like, wow, I could have been out there in the middle of that. But he protected me even when I questioned him,
I remember, because you have people of certain faiths, or even in the Christian faith, you have Christians among us who would say that God is not in prisons, or even me as a when I went to the Navy, people were questioning whether or not it's right by God to go into the military.
Right.
And I remember at first grappling with whether or not, after hearing that, thinking maybe they're right. Maybe they're right. Maybe, it is wrong to to go to war and all that kind of stuff. But then I thought, as I got older, what would happen if you took all of the Christians out of the military? What would it be like on the battlefield? Then I thought, what happens if you took all of the Christians out of prisons? What would that be like? Whether they became Christians there or whether they went in there as Christians, and, people don't know what goes on in people's hearts. But then working in Hollywood, which has been my background, I thought, what would it be like if you took what few Christians there are in Hollywood out of Hollywood? What would Hollywood be like? God puts his people in all these places to reach other people or to impact and influence other people. And I really do believe that the scripture teaches us that if it were not for the providential dealings with God in and through his people, the world would already be over. When he withdraws his active presence in human life, that's when the world is officially and literally over. So my question to you is, how do you think your conversion to Christianity, to coming to Christ, how do you think you played a role as a Christian in prison? Did your faith impact others in there?
Without a doubt. Like I said, when I was found suitable for parole, when they granted me parole, there's a process that the governor has the final say so. So, for example, the board can grant you parole, but the governor can deny it if he chooses to.
Right.
So, once again, I went through the process of being granted parole, but then I had to wait for the governor to give his stamp of approval.
How long did that take?
I can't remember exactly, but I think it's I want to say 4 or 5 months.
Oh, wow. That had to be a trip. You've been told you can leave, but then now you got to wait 4 or 5 months before you can actually leave. I'd have been overcome with anxiety.
Right. And I was. But once again, like I touched on earlier, so many people were happy for me. And the reason they were happy for me, which majority of them tell me, is because of the effect I had on them doing the work that I was doing. And how I helped so many other individuals get granted parole through, me facilitating the programs that I facilitated. So a lot of it, my faith played a part in it. The growth that I went through, all these things that God worked through me, I was able to help others with these things. So it was one of those things that my faith helped me help others. And that's, to me, that outside of the feeling of knowing that you're going home, knowing that I helped other individuals do the same, you know, that was so fulfilling. It always felt good,
right?
You know, knowing that I was able to help another individual, you know, go home or get home to their family, and, you know, go home and have kids and, you know, lead productive lives. Like I said, when you look at the numbers, the majority of people that were granted parole went through the programs that I facilitated. So knowing that I was able to touch people in that way was great.
Right.
It's still great.
Do you keep in contact with any of them?
Oh, yes. Since I've been here, I've talked to like 3 guys that I was friends with and they're still friends to the day. We talk, we've gone out to eat. I have one friend, his name is Reginald Kirk, and he's up in Frisco. And LA is known for like the swap meet. So you could get stuff there that people can't get nowhere else. So I like get him a hat, mail it to him. Just different friends and relationships that were created in there and carried out here. And it's good. I've had a few individuals that I know have passed, you know, but we're blessed to be able to get home and pass, you know, in society, which to me I think is a good thing.
Were there many people in that also shared the Christian faith with you that you were able to fellowship with?
Yes, a lot. It's like I said, it's a microcosm of society. The same thing that exists out here exists in here. You know, you have negatives and positives. You know, you encounter good experiences with some people, sometimes bad. But for the most part, that was a blessing within itself to be able to know that God worked through me to help other people.
Right,
you know?
Right. Now, how many kids do you have?
2.
2.
Yes.
And how old are they?
One is 16 months and one is 35.
Okay. Now, so obviously you have one since you've gotten out. How does that make you feel? I mean, and especially as a father, you know.
Well, it's an ongoing process because, as you know, my oldest son, he was born when I was incarcerated. So his mother was like 2 or 3 months pregnant when I got incarcerated. So I wasn't able to really experience a lot of things like changing diapers and, you know, feeding and just all the things that you experience as a father with your child. I missed a lot of that. But, my youngest son, so I'm going through all that right now with him, being able to change his diapers, watching him walk for the first time, you know, just all of it is cool.
Now, but your oldest one, he's doing time.
Yes, he's incarcerated right now.
So, do you stay in contact with him?
Well, unfortunately, he's mad at me. So
right. Yeah. As kids often do get mad at us,
and vice versa.
Right. So how do you do it, or what would you want to communicate to him while he's in? What would you want him to? Because it doesn't. Because I know that he hasn't yet arrived to the place where you've arrived to, where you sort of made peace with everything that you had to go through while you were in. If he hasn't made peace yet with that, with his crimes and whatever he's done, how would you advise him?
Well, one of the things that I stressed when I was facilitating some of the programs that I facilitated was the first thing you have to do is be honest with yourself. That's off the top. Then you have to start challenging your belief systems, your values. And when I say belief system, it's not confined to your spirituality, whether it's Christianity, Islam, Judaism, whatever. But your belief system, like with gang members, they think that this is their neighborhood or, things like that. Why do you feel that way? Why do you think this is yours? Things of that nature. You just have to really, like I always use the term, peel back layers of the onion and get to the core of, certain things. And until people do that, especially those in those situations like being incarcerated or drugs or whatever, until you start exploring these things, a lot of stuff's not going to reveal itself, and also just your faith, in God.
A lot of people who don't believe or refer to themselves as atheists, which I don't believe there's any such thing in real life, but they will look to somebody like you or me or any other Christian and say that we view Christ and religion as a crutch. Is that how you view it? As a crutch?
I don't view it as a crutch, but I'm dependent on it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I think, I it's funny because people say things to us like that. And I would be like, yeah, it is. I mean, we look at these metaphors differently and apply them differently. But the crutch is essentially what you just said. It is dependence.
Well, I would pose the question to a person that asked me that: do you consider food a crutch? Do you consider air, water a crutch?
Air.
These are things that we're dependent upon. So, I mean, just like you feed the body, you have to feed the soul.
It's funny because I did a message once, and maybe one of the Provocateur messages, where one of the verses comes out of John, where Christ refers to himself as the bread of life. But that's a perfect response to what you're saying. If Christ is a crutch, then it's one I welcome. Just like I welcome food, which is a crutch. It's critical to my existence. Christ is critical to my existence. Right. And he is called the bread of life. The bread of life. So with you being a Christian now, what do you think that your faith has? How do you think it is shaping your life after incarceration? And what's next for you? What do you want to do?
Well, basically, it's the same. But as far as what I want to do is what I did in there, help as many people as I can, especially, like I've told you, the youth, trying to break this cycle. I know I probably will never be able to reach everybody, but as many people as I can to prevent them from going down the path that I went through, even though I needed to go down that path. I know it's kind of like contradicting, but I went through what I went through, needed to, and it was part of his plan. And that has to be understood too. And I'm not going to get into it. We talk about this, but that was his plan for me to go through. Right. But if I can help others have another plan, or, just prevent people from having to experience what I experienced. Right. And, saving people, because I feel like it's all connected. If I can help a young, boy or girl not go to jail, but also maybe stopping them from taking a path that may lead to someone else losing their life or whatever, just good. Like I said, like how I was able to touch and affect a lot of individuals when I was incarcerated. The same here. You know, it doesn't stop. I mean, because really, the work is really out here so that they don't go in there.
Right.
So basically that. And just, you know, trying to live the way the Lord wants me to live and do his work.
Do you think that, has anyone ever accused you now of being like hypocritical?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's, once again, the same things that exist out here exist in there. These are things that are going to happen. You're going to have people that don't understand. You're going to have friends that may become, I don't want to say enemies, but you may lose friends.
Right.
Family members as well. But I try not to get caught up into that. If I offend somebody, I don't have no problem apologizing, especially if it's clear that I did something wrong. And maybe even if it's not clear, if you feel like I harmed you in some form or fashion, I can apologize even if I don't agree with it.
Right. Yeah, that's got to be rough because, you know, people like to throw things back in your face all the time. Even when you're Christian, you do one thing that makes people familiar with you, that makes people be reminded of what you used to be. They want to throw that in your face because what happens is I found that a lot of times when people know you're a Christian, what they want to do is when they want something to go their way that involves you, they start like, if you don't go their way, they want to invoke your Christianity and go like, you know, I thought you were a Christian, or I thought you were this, and I thought you were that, because they want to use your religion to get you to do what they want, you know. But we always have to remember and to remind them that we are responsible to serve the Lord,
right?
Not other individuals, and to Him only do we live and have our being. I mean, what do you think? I mean, what are things you want if you were to leave the world today? God forbid, but if you were to leave today, what would you want? Family, friends, enemies, whoever. What would you want them to know about Mark Hundley?
That first and foremost, I've made mistakes. I've sinned. But I know in my heart that I've done more good than I've done bad. And I think that's really all we all can do. You know, like you stated earlier, we're all sinners. I'm trying to sin as less as possible.
Right. So your you know, if I were to say Mark is what? If how you finish that, Mark is
A child of God.
right. Now, do you ever fear as a Christian that do you ever feel yourself that is not genuine, that is not real?
You know, we've talked a lot about different things, and just like I stated when I was incarcerated, I would have questions. I continue. You know, as I continue to grow spiritually, I question certain things, and in my opinion and based upon my faith, I think that's understandable. But I also know that, you know, I think a lot of times men, women, whatever, humans or whatever, we tend to put things on God. We try to define God. And I think that's like wrong, but I think it's understandable. I think once again, because we're flawed, because we're sinners, we tend to question, you know, we try to understand things, and to me, you can't explain God.
Right.
You know, sometimes you hear people say, well, the hand of God. God doesn't need no hand.
Right.
You know,
Right.
or God sitting on his throne. And I understand it from a metaphorical sense, but when you everything is his throne.
Right.
He's able to go wherever he wants.
Right.
He doesn't have to fly.
That's something a lot of people don't really understand. God is not he's eternal. He is without form. He's never been seen. And really, the only way you can see God is to be God. And Christ said, no one has seen the Father at any time except for the only begotten Son. That's because he himself was God. You see what I mean? So we don't have to understand. Like, people think that there's a standard of understanding in order to know God. And there is. The basic thing you need to understand is you. You need to understand that you are a sinner. Not you, but all of us. That we're all sinners, and that we have to be made aware of that fact. We have to be made aware that we have violated the law of God, and that we need to appear before the judge and find acceptance. The only way you can find acceptance in this life is to lay down the weapons of warfare against God and bow down to Christ. That is the only way. And so we want, men and women should seek to find peace with God. But what a lot of people are doing is trying to make a truce with God.
Right.
There's a big difference between calling for a truce and actually being granted peace. You know, a truce between two countries or a truce between two individuals means that we haven't reconciled our differences, but we're going to try to coexist.
Right.
Okay? Now, and think about this for a second. I see these bumper plates, these religious bumper plates that actually say coexist, and they use all the religious symbols. And and all these symbols spell out the word coexist. And the whole idea is for all religions, to coexist. The fact of the matter is, they cannot. And the idea of them coexisting is forming a truce. It's saying, I think I'm right, they think they're right. I'm not going to say I'm wrong, they're not going to say they're wrong, but we're going to agree not to kill each other. But that doesn't work in God's kingdom. That doesn't work in our relationship to God. He doesn't settle for truces. In fact, he doesn't settle at all. So we have to lay down our arms, recognize that we have broken God's law, and seek to be joined together with him in order that we can be justified by Christ, and therefore we end up making peace with God. And once this window of opportunity closes, the door will be shut and no man will be able to enter again. But in your testimony that you've been sharing with all of us right now, and I'm so glad you're doing it, is because I want people to be able to see in some small way how there's no difference between you or any other inmate and us. Ultimately speaking, people who weren't. The only difference that the only difference that is put in any man is the one put there by God. Other than that, everybody who is not a Christian or who is outside the household of faith, anyone who's outside, doesn't matter how good they are, doesn't matter how good they think they are, doesn't matter how bad they are, or whatever, it doesn't really matter. You are either in Christ or you're not. Or you're not. I mean, for you to come to faith, what was the hardest hurdle that you had to overcome in order to believe?
I can't really
Was everything immediately believable to you?
Well, I think once again, I think I've been blessed that I was chosen in the sense of God choosing me. Because as far back as I can remember, and we were talking about this, I think yesterday, it's just like how you can't remember learning how to walk. As far back as I can remember, God's been present in my life. So it's like, you know, I've had ups and downs where I've, like I said earlier, questioned things, whatever, but I've always felt his presence. So it's not, it's kind of hard to say. It's just one of those things that, like he says, I am. He was always there, you know?
That's interesting because, you know, people right now, you can ask somebody, a lot of people, when did you become a Christian? They can tell you the date, the hour, the time, the minute, the second, everything. And I've never been able to do that. It's always been like one of those kinds of things that was gradual, and you don't know. Even in the scripture, you know, we're told by the Lord Himself, the wind blows, we feel it, but we don't know where it comes from. We don't know where it goes, but we know we felt it. That it happened. We know that we were born, but we don't remember what it was like being in the womb. Right. We don't know the day. We know what time we were born because a doctor put it on some kind of a record, made a record of it, and put it on our birth certificate. But we have no recollection of it at all. Nor did we pick our parents. We didn't have a choice in that, and we don't have a choice of the day we die.
Right. We
don't have a choice for any of that kind of thing. So the idea that people can say when they were born again and all that kind of stuff, I just think is kind of, you know, odd. But they're really talking about some experience, like walking down to an altar call in a church where some pastor says, "Come up to the front or close your eyes and say this prayer with me." And I know so many people that have walked down that path, that have walked down the aisle, answered an altar call, and then immediately when they leave, not long after that, they go right back to what they were before. Right. Because people get caught up in a moment. And like it's like going to a concert, you know, you get caught up in everything. And so you go with it. And then you don't understand why it didn't take.
Right.
You know, it didn't want to take. But you know, what as we close up now, what would you like to say to the Bible Provocateur audience? What would you say? Whatever you want to say. You got time, so whatever you want to say.
I think one of the main things that I would like to stress is, as believers, stay firm in your belief and not really. I mean, it's hard not to get caught up in what's going on in the world right now, but keep faith and don't get caught up in all this smoke and mirrors and politics and all the stuff that's going on in the world. You know, stay focused on your faith. And I know it's hard. It really is. I mean, I have moments, I'm pretty sure you do, you know, just dealing with, I mean, because we exist in the world. But once again, our faith should, you know, supersede all that.
All right. And what does faith mean to you?
My faith in God. That He has me like He always has.
Right. That He keeps you. One of my, you know, I hate when I say one of my favorite verses in the Bible because I say that about every verse that I say that about. This is my favorite verse. It actually is my favorite verse in this context right now. But what I was thinking about was in Hebrews, where the writer says, "Faith is the substance of things hoped for, and the evidence of unseen things." And so, and essentially, what it's saying is that faith is that which makes our understanding about God real. It's faith is what makes God real to us. Not to say that He's not real if we don't have faith, but it's our only conduit to him. It's our only connective tissue. It's our only umbilical cord to the Almighty himself.
Right.
It's fake. That's what it is.
Exactly.
And so with that, we'll close. And I want, speaking to the Bible Provocateur listeners, I hope that you've been blessed by this. And as I said, this was the first of a series of interviews that I'm titling Just Talking. And today's topic, I've called The Prisoner of the State to the Prisoner of the Lord. And that's my cousin Mark. And I want to thank him for coming here and talking about it and sharing these things with you. And hopefully it's beneficial to you. Any last words?
Thank you. Thank you to the listeners.
So I hope until the next time, this is the Bible Provocateur. I'm your host, Jonathan Eubanks. Look forward to the next podcast. And in the meantime, be persuaded and be provoked. Thank you very much.